Hello friends, welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. In this somewhat short video, I am going to build a very basic version of jQuery to kind of talk about what jQuery does and demystify it a little bit. This was a suggestion from Alka, who is an awesome person, a mod on the channel. He's the maintainer of TMI.js. You should check him out. Go to twitch.tv/Alka. But what we're going to do is first just define what is this $sign. Yeah, there's Alka. He's in the chat. So what is this $sign? We'll talk about what that is. We'll also talk about how a function can do different things with different parameters. So if you've used jQuery before, you might have noticed that you can call it and pass in different things. I'll talk about how that works. And then we're going to use proxies to implement .css on a node list, and we'll get there. And then after that, I'll point you to you-might-not-need-jQuery.com, which shows you how you would do things in jQuery versus how you can do them in vanilla JavaScript that mostly work across browsers. So first of all, jQuery. If you're a web developer, you've probably heard of it. If you're a new web developer, you might not have used it, but this was very prevalent on the web. It's still very prevalent on the web, but this is a library that's used to basically manipulate the DOM, create web pages. And so just to show you how it works, I'm actually going to add jQuery to a web page, and we'll use jQuery really quick to do some things. So we have jQuery from a CDN. Let's go ahead and just create a basic file. So I'm going to create a folder. We'll say with jQuery. And inside of there, I will create an index.html. Inside of here, we're going to add the link to the real jQuery. So in this file, we're using the real jQuery. All right. And then right here, I'm just going to have a div. Well, let's do like an h1 that says hello world. It should be good enough. All right. And then I'm going to add a script. We're going to call this app.js. And that's where we're going to write our code. So in here, I'll create app.js. And I will do the first thing that you probably have done with jQuery. Now, there are a couple of different ways to do this, but basically jQuery is a $sign. And you can, if you invoke it with a function, this is known as the jQuery ready function. Now, there are a couple of ways to do this. And actually, let me disable my linter because it's going to complain about a lot of things. Sorry, so no linter, but there's different ways to do this. You could do $ready, different ways, but basically if you pass in a function, this is the document ready function. And inside of here, we'll say document is ready. And basically this function will get stored behind the scenes, and then whenever we're able to manipulate the DOM, whenever everything's done loading, this function will run and we can do all of our coding. So let's go ahead and start this up. So I'm going to go into this folder, and I'm going to use a tool called Light Server. This is just a static file server, but it automatically refreshes when the code changes. So we see hello world, and we can see right here, document is ready. Now, let's do some interesting things. So what jQuery allows you to do is select elements on the page. So let's say I wanted to select this h1. I could use jQuery. I could say $sign. I can pass in h1. And that will select the h1 on the page, and then I can do interesting things with it. I could do CSS with it. I could say set the color property to red, and that should change it to red when the page loads. Right? Great work. I could also do things like select the h1, and then whenever we click on it, do something interesting. And in this case, I'm just going to alert. Wow. So that's nice. So now if I click on it, wow, that's great. Let's also add some other CSS. So I could also do something like, I believe you can pass in an object here. So if I pass in an object where the keys are the CSS properties. So I want the cursor to be pointer. Now, I know that I could do that all in one go, but I want to show like different ways of using all of this. So now if I hover over it, yeah, so you can see that the cursor is actually a pointer. So that's pretty cool. And then in the meantime, let's also specify the, can I do this? Is it camel cased? Let's see, does it work? Hey, look at that, we got a sans serif font. All right, so we can set styles, we can do like click events. I guess one last thing is I'll show you that these are actually collections. So let's say I have an unordered list, and let's say I have a few list items in here that says, hi, Mom. It also says today is a day. And it also says, I'm on Twitch. And that should give us some list items, right? And so what I'll show you is that with jQuery, not only can you select individual items, you can select multiple items. So if I do $ with li, that will select every single li on the page. And then I could do something like CSS, and we'll set the font family to sans serif. And that should actually, you can see the font changed. It's selected every single one. And there's another thing I can do is I can iterate over the elements. So I'm going to say dot each. I believe this will work. And in this case, I think I actually need to pass in a function so that it will bind the context to be the element itself. And then inside the function, I can do like this. I think we get access to the index. I don't know. Let's see if this works. Can we go ahead and make it Comic Sans? I guess that would make sense because it is jQuery. I don't know. But we'll say if I is even, then we'll say this dot CSS color red. Oh no, we'll do green. Else we're gonna make it blue. So if it's an even index in the list, make it green. Otherwise, we're gonna make it orange. All right, does this work? This does not work. This .css is not a function. Oh, because this is the actual element. I see. So what we actually have to do is we have to turn it into a jQuery thing, so that way we can do .css. Because if I just log it, if we just log this, exactly, Daniel Garden has it. If we log this, it's literally the element. It's not a jQuery thing. It's just the element. So we need to turn it back into a jQuery thing. So we'll do this, which makes it so that I can do things like .css. So there we go. So if it's even, it's green. If it's odd, it's orange. Great. So there's a ton of other things you can do with jQuery, but this gives you an idea of some of the things that we might do and how it works. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put this in a document that does not have jQuery, and we're going to make it work. We're basically going to, one step at a time, make this code actually run. Can anyone think of anything else that I should do? I think this is what I'm going to implement. Remake Twitch in jQuery. And this is good. This is good. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a new file. Not a new file. I'm going to create a new folder. We'll call it custom jQuery. Comic Sans. Oh yeah, you could do like a pin to. I won't worry about. Thank you, Doc. And what's up, Doc? I won't worry about that mainly because I just want to show how we can get all of this working. But that's a good point. And like I mentioned, there's a ton more you can do with jQuery. But I'm just going to show how would we write the code to make this work. So we're going to create a new file. Index.html. Actually, I'm just going to copy. I'm going to copy both of these files without jQuery. We're going to put them in this folder called custom jQuery. But the thing that we're going to do is I'm going to remove the jQuery CDN, right? So now, if I start this up, it's going to load. Let me make sure I have the right file open. Yeah, it's going to load this file, but it's going to break because we don't have jQuery anymore. And can anyone tell me? Yeah, it's an HTML element. Can anyone tell me what will happen if I try to run this code without jQuery? If I run this code without jQuery, what is the error I'm going to get? If you can tell me that, you get 100 invisible points. Yeah, it'll break, but what's the error I'm going to get? $ is not defined. Yeah. Or it's similar. It'll probably be cannot invoke undefined, or undefined is not a function. Yeah, something like that. So let's do it. So I'm going to kill this one, and then we're going to go into custom jQuery. And we'll start up the server here. And if we open up the dev tools, $ is not defined, right? So I took out jQuery. An ID10T error. Yeah, I mean, not really, because we'll fix it. But I took out the jQuery library. So now, my bank does it. There literally is, there's no money. There's no money on the page. Money is not defined. How can we make it defined? And this comes to our first point here is, what is $? Now, when we look at this code, $, if you've looked at JavaScript before, $sign is just a function, right? We see the $sign. Anytime we're looking at the $sign, we pretty much always see these parentheses, right? It's a function. It's also cash money. But in this case, it's a function. And that's the first thing that I'm going to show you, is that you can literally create variables that are called $sign. So I'm going to create a new file here called garden query.js. This is the coding garden. I don't know. But in this file, and let's take a quick stretch. Yeah, and Doc is pointing us to the documentation that shows you all the different things that you can pass into jQuery. So first of all, we'll ignore my linter, but then I will literally define $sign. So wait, get rid of that. Get docked. Yeah, doc is awesome. All right, so I can literally do that. I mean, if you've never seen this before, your mind might be blown. But I can literally name a function $sign. That's one way. Or actually, you don't need that. So that's one way to do it. I also could do. We could do it the modern way of putting it in an arrow function. So we could also do something like this. Both of these will work. Let's do it this way. We'll do it this way. So I have literally defined a function called money, called $sign. And now, if I add this script file to my page, so I'm going to add it right above app.js. So I'm going to add in garden query. Now, the page doesn't break. Can I? There are only certain emojis that work as variable names, but the code doesn't break, but it also doesn't work. So let's get it working. We can see in this code that the first thing we're doing to $sign is we're passing in a function. And so let's get that working. So we can, basically what we need to do is we need to look at the arguments that are passed into this $sign, because the $sign is called in multiple different ways. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the rest operator. We're going to call this args. And I'm going to say if args at 0, if the type of that is a function, then we know that we have the document ready function. So I'm going to say my ready function is going to be args at 0. And then I need to listen for when the document is ready. So what I'm going to do is I'll say document.add event listener dom content ready. I think that's the event I want. But what I'll do is I'll say whenever the DOM content is ready, I need to invoke that ready function, just like that. And now we should at least see this line of code. Document is ready. Let's see. Let's also log args. Make sure that that's happening. Yeah, so args is an array, and if let's log the type of args at 0. Uh-oh, yeah, we'll fix it. We'll get it working. It is a function, all right. And then we're adding an event listener for DOM content ready. This just might be wrong. Lowercase content? Let's look it up. DOM content ready. DOM ready? Document ready. We basically need the name of the event. Is it document ready? Document.ready state. Did I do DOM? Oh, DOM content loaded. Thank you. That's what it is. It's DOM content loaded, not DOM content ready. But basically, this event is built into the web browser. And so document is also built into the web browser. These are all things we can do without a separate library. So we're listening for DOM content loaded, then we'll call the ready function. This should do it. DOM content is ready. Nice. Okay, so we got that line of code working. Yeah, there is no normal function overloading. Basically, you have to look at the arguments to decide what you want to do. And so that comes to our next point is, so first of all, what is $sign? It's just a variable. It's just a function. You can literally put whatever you want in it. And jQuery just so happened to have put a function inside of it. Now, how can a function do different things with different parameters? So we can see in the code, we pass in a function, and that works. Alan, with the 200 bits, thank you very much. But we passed in the function, works just fine. Now, how can we get this working? So basically, if we pass in a string, it needs to be a selector. And like I mentioned, in jQuery, there are other things you can do. You can also pass in an HTML string, and then it actually creates the element. For this scenario, we're just going to worry about the case of selecting. So what we'll do now is we'll say else if the type of the arguments at 0 is equal to a string, then that means we're going to do a selector. So we'll do select an element. In this case, we will document ready listener. So in JavaScript, this is basically how you overload a function. You literally have to look at the arguments that are passed in and decide what to do based on that. But if it is a string, we are going to return the selector, but it's going to have some special things on it. But really, what I'm going to do right now is I'll say return document.query selector all for that specific selector. So I'm going to say the selector is args at 0. And query selector all is built into the web browser. And this is one of the main reasons why you might not use jQuery nowadays, is because query selector and query selector all are built into the web browser. And they work in a similar way in that you can pass in a CSS selector and it will select those elements. It's different in that it's not a jQuery collection, but I'll show you how we can make it a little, we can add those extra things. But that would be the basic thing we need to do there. We need to grab that specific collection of elements. So we'll do that. And thank you very much, Mitch, with the 200 bits. Interesting. Cheer 200 was lowercased. Why wasn't it capital? But thank you. Thank you for the bits. All right. Okay, so yeah, but we still get another error because now we're trying to do .css to change the styles on it. They can be any case. That's good to know. I need to fix my overlay. So .css is not a function. You can see that we're trying to call it. So for this, to get this very first one working, we technically select all of the H1s on the page and then set all of their CSS to be color red. Now, how can we get this working? Basically, this query selector all is a collection. So we'll call this the collection. And I mean, this is a node list. So if you look up query selector all on Mozilla Developer Network, it'll tell you that it returns a node list. And technically, it's just a JavaScript object. So we can attach properties to it. So I'm going to say collection.css is a function. And thank you very much, Shines Love, with the weird cased 100 bits. So CSS is now a property of that collection, and we're returning that. So now that works. It's not changing the styles, but it still technically works. And the other thing that we want is on, but let's fix that. So let's at least just get this line working. If we call .css, every item in that collection we need to apply. And then CSS is also a function that needs to be overloaded. So, okay, so this is going to take in the style, we'll call this the CSS args. And we'll say if CSS args at 0 is a string, then that means we want to, in this scenario, we want to set that property on the style. Now, what's tricky is not tricky, but what's different is in jQuery, if you only pass in the first parameter, that actually returns the computed style. We're not going to implement that. We're just going to assume that they're setting the style. So let's get this working. So if I pass in 2 strings, we want to set this style property to be that value. So if the first argument is a string, we'll say the property is, and actually let's use destructuring. So we'll say, and thank you very much, Revive Newt, 3,000 bits. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much. That's a lot of bits. That might be the most bits ever cheered at me. I appreciate you so much. Okay, so we have property and we have value. And so, wow, yeah, hype emotes in the chat. Thank you so much. But this is CSS destructuring. So CSS args is an array. That array is going to have 2 values. It's going to have color and red inside of it. And then the, are we on a hype train? We're on a hype train. Thank you. Level 3 already. Oh, wow. Okay, well, this is still a YouTube video, but for those of you watching on YouTube, we're on a hype train. Mitch with 100 bits. Thank you so much. Okay, so we're plucking out the property and the value, and then what we need to do is we need to iterate over this collection, and every single item, we need to specify what the... we need to set that CSS property. So I'm going to do collection.forEach, and for every element, we're going to say element.style at that property equals that value. All right. Does it work? Oh, okay. So we at least were able to set it to red. So that's awesome. So we got this line of code running, right? The other scenario is what if we pass in an object, right? If we pass in an object, then we need to specify each individual property and value. And Trains with the gifted sub. Thank you very much, Trains. 2 gifted subs. Congrats to Asason and Krumdar. Okay. So we now need to handle what if we pass in an object. Let's get that working. So if the argument at 0 is a string, do this. Else, if the type of that argument at 0 is a object. And thank you, Julian, for the 50 bits. Much appreciated. If it's an object, we basically need to do this, but we need to do this for every property and value inside of the object. So I'm going to do object.entries. And object.entries on CSS args at 0. Revive Newt with 5 more gifted subs. You are too kind, Revive Newt. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, else if. Thank you, Freaky. Else if. Okay, so if the argument is an object, like it is in this scenario, then we need to iterate over over all the properties and values. So I'm going to do entries, and for each of those entries, we get the property and the value. And actually, I should probably do something like this. You could iterate both ways, but basically what I'm doing here is I'm iterating over all of the properties and values on that object. We need parens. Fishy Coding with 100 bits. Thank you very much, Fishy Coding. So we iterate over all the properties, and then we don't need that line of code anymore. And then for every element, we set that property and that value. I mean, technically, it might make more sense. I think it's better if we do this. Honestly, it's better if we do this. The main reason being is for every element, we're going to set all of those properties. And I can cache this. I'll say like CSS props equals that. So don't do it multiple times. All right, get all of the keys and the values. For every element, set all of those keys and values. And if we've done it right, now we're at least setting the font family. All right, we're on our way. We're very, very close. The next thing we need to set up is .on. So .on is just like add event listener. However, it is, in this scenario, it's working on an entire collection. I'm going to do something that is not ideal. There's better ways to do it, but we're going to do it anyways. Here's what we're going to do. So if... it is a string. So this comes into this statement right here. So if the first argument is a string, it actually could either be a CSS property or it could be the word click. So if it's the word click, then I'm going to assume that it's an event handler. And technically, you can pass in any DOM event. So you would have to have extra code that looks at every single DOM event name and looks for that and stuff like that. But first of all, thank you all for the supports. I appreciate you. But all right, so now I'll say if that args at 0 equals on, then we're not going to do the selection bit. We're going to do add event listener. So I'll say if, and Nino Store with the sub. Thank you very much for the sub. Okay, so if args at 0 is equal to click. Do this, else select the element. So I'm going to take the rest of this code and push it into there. And awesome slimes with 100 bits. Thank you very much. Is it that? Mr. Chrismu with the Twitch Prime sub. Thank you very much. Shouldn't I be adding the function onto the collection? Yeah, that's what I was going to show you. Yes, but so if the argument is click, and actually we'll say listen for event, and then right here we should say we should look for all types of events, not just click. And thank you, Gak, for that resub who says hello. Thank you very much. All right, so we've done that. Now we need to add it to the collection. Actually, yeah, you're actually totally right. Yeah, I messed up. You're totally right. All right, I need to undo this. And thank you very much, Revive New. More bits! That's too much support, Revive New. That's too much support. Yeah, you're right. I should be adding it to on, not to this specific thing. Because right now... Wait. Here. Oh, yeah. You're right. I should... okay. I should be adding it here. Collection.on. There we go. You're right. I messed that up. Okay. So now, if they call on, that's that function. So that should fix that. That's good. Also, wait. We got more gifted subs. Trains with the 5 gifted. Thank you so much. All right. There's a ton of support. I appreciate you all. You're all too kind. Too kind! Monoloito, 100 bits. Wow, okay. Right, so we fixed that. We at least fixed the fact that on was not a thing, but yeah, I totally misconstrued this. This should actually be the event name. And so on will accept 2 arguments. It accepts the event name and it accepts the handler. And then it's easy enough to just add that event listener. And what we're gonna do now is we're actually gonna add it to every element in the collection. So I'm gonna say collection.forEach element. We're going to say element.add event listener for that specific event name, and we'll add that specific handler. Okay, so that should implement that. We're going to have to do some things with binding. That's fine. But what we want to implement next is this each function, because the each function allows us to iterate. So what we'll do is, so here we're specifying the on function, here we're specifying the CSS function, we're also going to specify the each. And it technically should just be collection.forEach. Let's see if this works. Yeah. Awesome. So we're getting there. We're getting closer and closer. So now the one thing that we need to implement is, what if the argument to the function is actually an HTML element? And Jance with the 200 bits. Thank you very much, Jance, for those 200 bits. Much appreciated. Query selector all doesn't return an array. That's fine. It does. The node list does have a for each. For each does exist, but things like map filter reduce, those don't exist on a node list. Okay. We set up each, that's fine. But we now have our third scenario. So this function in our scenario takes in a function, it takes in a string, or it takes in an HTML element. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually just going to log the type of... let's actually log this. And also log the type of this. So this is actually the window. So we need to change the this value inside of the each to be the actual element itself. So that's our first step. Is not only is this for each, this is a function that accepts a callback. And then we'll say collection.forEach element. We'll do a callback.bind that element, and then we'll invoke that callback with the element and the index. Like that. Unexpected token. What happened? Oh. A great... I'm trying. This is taking longer than I thought. Oh, I need to say bound function. Oh, the index comes first? And actually, the way I'm using it, you're right. Yeah, okay, so this actually should be index. But the index should be here. And I need to invoke the bound function. All right, we're getting in the weeds. This is getting trickier and trickier, but now this should actually be the element itself. Great. And now, whenever we invoke jQuery with an element, that's when we need to handle it. So we're handling functions, strings, we need to handle a specific element. Thank you all so much for the support. You're too kind. You are too kind. Okay, so when we call each, that's going to accept a callback. We're going to iterate over all of the elements. We're going to create a bound function that binds itself to the element itself. So this is equal to that element inside the function. And then we're going to invoke that function with the index and the element. Now, this technically would break if someone were to call this with an arrow function instead of a regular function, but we're not going to worry about that. What I do want to see though is what type is this? This .constructor .name. What's the constructor here? HTML li element. Basically, I need to see, does this particular thing implement HTML element? Is that possible? Jay Schwitz with the 500 hits. Thank you very much. Use jQuery to make another jQuery. If I look at the prototype, undefined. Prototype. Proto. How's this work? How can I figure out if this is an HTML element? Here we go. Instance of constructor.name. And Airsick with the Twitch Prime sub. Thank you very much, Airsick. Is that argument an instance of object? And if it is, if we get the prototype of it, all right. Object.get prototype of this. And the prototype should be, yeah, HTML element prototype. Yeah. Constructor.name. All right, and again, we're getting in the weeds, but that's an HTML li. Honestly, all I'm gonna do, honestly, is I'm just gonna say, if the constructor name starts with capital HTML. If it starts with capital HTML, we're going to do it. Okay, so we have, if it's a function, we're handling that. If it's a string, we're handling that. We now need to say else if the type of the arguments at 0 is equal to an object, and arguments at 0.constructor.name starts with easy mode, HTML, like that. So we'll just say, we have an element. All right, let's see, does this work? Yeah, so we have an element. Great. Great. So if it's an element, technically what we want to do with it is create a selector that has it. Ends with element? We could do both. We could say starts with HTML and ends with element. But here's the thing. So whenever we pass in this selector, I basically need a node list that has all of these properties on it. It has each on in CSS. Let's see if it's possible to create my own node list. Node list. This is definitely more than 3 lines of code. Can I create a node list? Oh, thank you, Elko. Much appreciated. Create my own node.js. This is definitely, I mean, we're already at like 30 minutes at this point. I think it's fine. It's still fairly interesting. And we're almost done. We're almost done. Let's see. arg0 instance of HTML element. I like that. Let's try it. I mean, I have no idea what we're doing, but instance of HTML element. Does this work? We have an element. Thank you. Thank you very much. Cool. Yeah, this works because all of the HTML elements inherit from HTML element. All right. What we technically need is a node list. And so all of these things that I'm doing right here for this collection is like I'm adding them to the collection. I'm going to put this in a function. So I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to say decorate or make nice. Make a nice collection. We're going to pass in the collection. And so this will just be a function, make nice collection, that takes in a collection and then does the things that we were just doing to it. So basically, it attaches those properties. It attaches each on and CSS to the collection. So now we can reuse this function, make nice collection, here, but we basically need to create a collection. And I don't know if this is going to work, but we'll try it. So I want a collection that'll be a new node list. And then I can say like collection dot can I not add it? I mean, can I create a node list where I just pass in an array with the element inside of it and return the collection? Let's see if I get an error. Illegal constructor. I mean, I guess technically it doesn't even have to, I guess it doesn't have to necessarily be a node list. It just needs to be an array. Because all we're doing up here is we are using for each on it. Illegal constructor. This could actually work. It works. That's it. We literally, we don't need a node collection. We just need an array. And yeah, and so that's the thing. Like, we could do object-oriented programming. This was supposed to be like nice and quick and hacky, just to show you how in 30 minutes or so I can implement some of the functionality. But in the real world, yes, you would want better coding practices. You would want potentially object-oriented. You would want to have some sort of instance that automatically adds these properties. But yeah, I'll mention the reason that this worked is because all we're doing with the collection is accessing for each. That's literally the only thing that we're doing. If we were accessing other node list properties, then we would need to create a node list. But in this case, we don't. We can just do that. Hey, Lamy. Welcome. I'm glad you could be in the chat. All right, so I think we're there. Like, the app works. Look at it. We have a ready function. We can specify specific elements. Oh, so Revive Nude is taking object-oriented programming right now. Yeah, so you could, and actually you could think of this collection. This is an object. You could call it a, I mean, in this case it's a node list, but you could call this a jQuery collection object. And a jQuery collection object has methods like on in CSS. And its internal state is the array or the list of all the elements in that collection. Yeah, okay. So, that's it. That's it, right? And yeah, it works. I can't believe it works. So, one thing we didn't do is we actually didn't use a proxy, and I'm okay with that. I said I was going to use a proxy at the beginning, but we didn't. But technically what we could have done is instead of iterating over the collection for all of these different things, we could have used a proxy to detect whenever something like .css is called on a on the collection, and if that's called, then we iterate over all of the elements. But I've already gone too deep. How do I cross this out? Can I do that? No, it's tildes. Tilde, right? Yeah, so it's crossed out. All right, see you later, Jaden Humphrey. Thanks for dropping by. Okay, so that's it. So this was fun. Let's just do a quick review of what we did. Basically, we took this code, which is basically a function that can accept different types of things. It accepts a function that accepts a function. It accepts a string. It accepts an object. the thing that's returned has multiple properties. The thing that is returned is has properties CSS and on in each. And we basically just implemented those things. So the first thing is $sign is literally just a function that takes in multiple arguments. And in JavaScript, this is basically how you do different things based on different types of arguments being passed in. In other programming languages, it has what's known as method overloading, where you basically can define a method multiple times with different types of arguments, and the right one will be called. In JavaScript, we don't have that, so we have to literally look at the arguments to decide what we need to do. If it's a function, we add a listener. If it's a string, we're assuming it's an element selector, and so we're doing query selector all. And if it's an element, we create a collection of one item with that specific thing. That's so true. It's actually really funny. So for anybody watching on YouTube, like all the people in the chat, they're like the cast of the show, right? We've got Revive Newt, we've got Alka, we've got Lechi, we've got Doc, we've got all the people, and you're here with them. So yeah, you're in it. You're here right now. Okay, so yeah, we can do different things based on what's passed into the function. And then if in JavaScript, it's easy enough to just add new properties to the thing that's returned. So we basically added these properties each on in CSS to the collection, and then we do those specific things. Now, I've already mentioned it multiple times. jQuery is much more complex than this. You can pass in HTML here. You can do certain things where it returns values. There's a lot more here that we didn't implement, but I hope this gave you a general idea of how, at a base level, a lot of these things are implemented. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is this thing called youmightnotneedjQuery.com. So this is a really cool website where basically you can search for any of the things that you might do in jQuery, like CSS, and it will tell you how you could do that with vanilla JavaScript. And like I mentioned, if you only pass in a single rule name, you're going to get back that style value. But if you pass in two properties like we did, it's exactly what we did. We do style.propertyName equals value. Let's also look at on. Not no. On. Effects. Children. Actually, let's search for like event listener. On? Events. Yeah, so in jQuery, you can do event name. Oh, actually, I didn't know you could pass in a selector, but we just did event name handler, and that's the same thing as add event listener. So definitely check out this website. You might not need jQuery. It's also okay if you use jQuery. Don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't use jQuery. It's your life. It's your code. Do what you want. But there's that. I think that's it. This has actually turned into a pretty long video, but I'll put all of this code on GitHub. I'll link it in the description. Thank you all for watching, and come join us on Twitch. You can be part of the cast and crew of the Coding Garden, and we'll see you there.